Welcome, friends, family, YouTubers all over the world, hopefully. How are you? This is Jeff with Astroscoop for another Astroscoop Astrology Livestream. So today is May 31st, 2024. And, okay, welcome. Well, that's interesting. Good evening. Carolyn says good evening. Good evening, Carolyn. I think there's a couple people in here. I'll wait a minute or so. But I wanted to, so the last live stream and the one before that, so for the last month or so, my channel's been growing slowly, which is good, but very slowly. But because of Russia, Pakistan, and the Ukraine, those are my top 3 views. So I truly appreciate any views from those countries. But the interesting thing is in the last week, 60% of my views are now from the United States. So have no clue why. And for those of you United States viewers, I think it's about 90% of you are still not subscribed to my channel. So that means you're viewing the channel, you're viewing the video outside of being signed in. Maybe you don't have a YouTube account, or you're not subscribed, you see my channel, or you have it on save to watch later or something like that. So please, if you watch my channel and you get any entertainment or value from it in any way or form, please subscribe. Please like, comment, subscribe, and share, all that good stuff. But definitely subscribe. And I know what it's like. I have a lot of subscriptions myself. I watch other astrologers. I watch tarot people. I watch tech reviews. I like to watch car reviewers. I'm going to be going to be in the market for a car this summer. So I'm starting to look up car reviews, like Consumer Reports, things like that. And so I follow a whole host of YouTubers, and it's hard on the subscribe list. It's hard to watch every video. So I do find myself every now and then unsubscribing from someone when I don't have time to view all their videos. Especially, I don't do that many videos, but some people do 2 or 3 a week. And there's even some people that do like 4 videos a week. So that's really hard to keep up with. So I understand that. But if, like I said, if you watch my videos and you're getting any sort of value, consistent value, please consider subscribe. You just go into YouTube here, you find the little bell, and then you can click all. You'll get notified of every video, personalized. So then it will personalize my videos based on what you're watching. Or you could just put none, and then you could go in and select what you'd like to watch as a subscriber. I have all my playlists on there. My playlists are pretty straightforward. Like I have all the elements for the astrology signs. I have earth signs, air signs, water, fire. I have the playlist for cusps, if you're a cusp sign person. And also the live streams is in a playlist, all these live streams that have been happening over the last few months. And the commentary, I have some meditation videos, full moon or moon phase videos, all that stuff's in the playlists. So I know that a lot of my older videos are actually helping my channel grow a lot more than the current content. So the live streams I'm doing now are just kind of long form content of the current sign we're in or period, and also the videos I've been doing. So last week we talked about the first decan or decanate of Gemini, which is a pure Gemini person or period, a double Mercury person, a Mercury ruled person, and the sub-ruler in the decan period is also Mercury. Now earlier today, I watched a male astrologer. I forgot his name, and he has around 20,000 subscribers. So he's doing pretty well. And he had a video from a couple of years ago on Gemini. So I just I saw it came up in my feed. I clicked on it, and I noticed in his video. Now I wrote all this out. I wrote all my notes out and been doing my research for the last 2 weeks before I watched his video. So I wasn't influenced. I'm normally not influenced by anyone's videos. I do some research. I look through my books, but I also just meditate and I use my intuition. That's a big part of coming to what I want to talk about and the areas that I'm attracted to for the evening, the kind of the path we want to be on for Astroscoop. But this particular man, he hit on so many points that I'm going to talk about tonight that were very similar, which is interesting. And I have to go back and subscribe to him. And I would like to give him a shout out if I can remember his name. But he did a really good video on Gemini, and he talked about the Decans 1, 2, and 3 as well for late May into June, and the differences between the Decans. And I don't see a lot of astrologers doing that. I think that's great because they really, really do matter. Now, there's a lot of argument among astrologers, depending on what systems astrologers use. There is a good amount of argument about the exact degrees within the Decan period, depending on what book you read and what system you use. And there's some imprecise measurements there with degrees. But I think overall, whatever system you're using, if you get it, whatever system you're using, and you do enough charts or consultations, and you look at enough charts with the degrees, with the planets and the degrees that the sign is in, it will make a lot of sense to you in the future. And anyone that's new to astrology, that can get a little complex. You want to just start with the basics and just start with sun sign astrology, and then grow from there. But the decans or decanates really do matter. And the more I look and do research into decans, which I've been doing for a long time, but I'm trying to fine tune my own learning and research. And the more I read and watch videos of other people talking about them, it gives me new insights into some of the people that I have done readings for, people I've worked with, been friends with, acquainted with, and even family members too. Because you think you know people really, really well, especially if you have a good memory for someone's chart. Like I have quite a good memory, not for everything, but I have a good memory for once I look up a wheel, once I look up someone's astrological wheel, their chart, I could pretty much see the visual in my head. If you ask me a year later, what was that person's moon in, or what did they have rising, I can usually come up with it pretty quick. It's pretty much imprinted in there, especially if it's a friend or a family member, someone close. So that it's just a great thing. It's just fun. So thank you, United States, for becoming more instrumental in helping me to grow my channel, which is great because the United States has been low on my viewership. It's always down towards like the 10 spot, or between 5 and 10. It's never been in the top 3. So that's great. So today is May 31st, as I mentioned. So we're still in the Gemini 1 period. But depending on when I do the live streams on a Friday or Saturday, and depending on how the month falls, I'm usually talking about a period that's upcoming. So it's not exactly on it. And again, I know some people have different opinions as far as when the 1 goes to 2 and the second decan goes to 3, etc. So tonight, let's talk about Gemini II, which is June 3rd to right around the 10th or 11th. So we have tomorrow's the 1st. So we have a couple more days where we're in the true Gemini period. And when I say true Gemini period, I just mean we're not near Taurus anymore. We're not near that cusp of Taurus. And we are going through each zodiac sign in each week. It's like a growth, like if you look at it in terms of a life cycle of someone that's 84 years old, 12 times 7, 84, or even 92, if you added 92, 96, somewhere up there for an extreme end of life, we're looking at that would divide the 12 signs equally, but it also divides each period, each decan equally throughout the year as well. So that's an interesting kind of way to look at it. So I've read some books on that, and I also have come up with my own sort of strategy, but it's definitely, so as we progress in the zodiac each week here and each period, we're looking at someone that with Gemini is still youthful, but older than the early Gemini or late Taurus, which was more of a still kind of a big kid or childhood. So now with Gemini II, we're looking at more like someone maybe getting out of high school or getting out of college, sort of that sort of thing, and starting their life as a very young adult that has to learn to persuade others. And you have to, you kind of have to learn to sell yourself to colleges or sell yourself to a graduate program, and then eventually at some point in your early mid-20s to a career and try to get jobs. And you're selling yourself, you're selling your skills, selling your personality, all that stuff, which is easier for some and harder for others. So the Gemini 2 person is a younger, more of a late teens, I would think, into young adult, and kind of almost kind of someone that's almost out of college and getting ready to start their adult life. So the main theme, I know there's some books that talk about this. Gemini is a sign. Gemini's phrase is "I think." Most people agree that it's around thought, which is the sensation. But it's Gemini, especially this period. Gemini 2 is very tied to language. So all Gemini people usually have a liking for language, a liking for words, even quiet Geminis. And Gemini placements, unless they're counter-indicated or afflicted in the chart, are usually good conduits of communication. Now, there's a lot of different areas of communication. It's not just verbal. There's emotional communication, there's spiritual communication, there's body language. And I think of someone that might be deaf or hard of hearing that might be watching me at some point. So they can't hear me, but they're watching me speak, and they're getting a vibration from me based on how I'm carrying myself and how I'm using my body, right? That sort of thing. They're getting cues. So Gemini's a sign. Last week, I really enjoyed talking about the Gemini 1 period last week, because Gemini is one of these signs. I feel like the more I delve into the popular astrology, the modern day kind of popular astrology, especially with a lot of Gen Z and younger millennials that are getting into astrology, it's interesting that I never thought of Gemini, the sign of Gemini in general, having such a strong connotation in terms of love or hate and how people's reactions to Gemini. We all know that about Scorpio. When we say Scorpio, there's a buzz usually to the sign of Scorpio, and it's not always a fair buzz, mind you. But I never could. Gemini is kind of a neutral sign. Gemini is a human sign. It's not an animal per se. So there's more of a neutrality with Geminis. Geminis can see, they can see your point of view, They can see their point of view. They may even see more points of view than Libra. But they will disagree. They'll see your point of view, but they'll often be argumentative and disagree with differing points of view, I think, more than Libra. I think Gemini is a sign that I think this is where the kind of love or hate gets with Gemini, because Gemini is a dual sign. Now, it's not fair to say that Gemini is two-faced, because Gemini really isn't two-faced. The twins are the same. Geminis have a laser, I think, like a laser focus when something interests them. And it's fast and furious when they're interested in something. And they are just, I think I mentioned this in the Gemini 1 live stream. Gemini is a sign of like what's around the corner. That's Gemini. You're traveling with someone with a Gemini planet, unless it's really afflicted or caught up in a really, caught in an earth or a water house and maybe has bad aspects to it or something that really, really dampens the energy, the air energy, is always kind of like what's around the corner. That's kind of like how I look at a Gemini planet in a chart. And of course, you would look to the person's Mercury to get a little more information. But Gemini 2 is language and thought. And it is the Venus Decan, which is a lot different. And this man's video I watched today, he talked about that. He talked about the Venus influence on these folks, which is similar to what I'm going to talk about. And the Gemini 1 person is pure Mercury. You got Mercury ruler, sub-rulers Mercury. There's a practical bent there, and they're very, very aggressive with ideas. Here now, you have the Gemini 2 people that are taking ideas and putting it more into their own language and doing it in a possibly more charming way or a more diplomatic way with the Venus Decan. And when I was researching celebrities and I was looking at their faces, I thought to myself, okay, are these Gemini people, are they more attractive? Are their features more balanced or more attractive in general than other Geminis, than a Gemini Taurus cusp or a Gemini 1 or a Gemini 3, which we'll talk about? And I don't know. I mean, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. There's a lot of very youthful, I think, looking Gemini, like actors and actresses and musicians that I think don't look their age. I think they look very youthful. Of course, a lot depends on their rising sign. Planets on that part of the chart near the first house can influence that. But yeah, I mean, Gemini's born this week, when I was looking them up, they are generally attractive and can have a boyish or girlish, I think, kind of attractiveness to them, which is kind of indicative, I think, of the twins, of the symbol of the twins. So keep in mind with Gemini 2, keep in mind if you are a Gemini or you know someone born this week, June 3rd to the 10th or 11th, we're looking at a strong need to express and use language. And it's verbal expression. So even a quiet, introverted Gemini born this week is still going to be verbal with their crowd or their little circle. They need that. They need meaning. They need meaning in their lives. Now, all Geminis get criticized for superficial behavior, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. That is Gemini. That's not being mean to say, oh, I'm a Gemini, how dare you say that? I'm not a superficial person. Doesn't mean all Geminis are superficial, but the interest in superficial things in life might be stronger in Gemini than, say, Virgo, its other Mercury counterpart, or Scorpio or Cancer. We're all attracted to some superficial things in life, and frankly, I think we need some superficial things with the heaviness of life. And also, we have other indicators in our chart that can propel us to have more superficial relationships or love relationships, that sort of thing. But they need meaning because of their verbal expression. And when I was looking up the celebrities, I thought to myself, okay, I've seen a lot of these actors in movies and actresses, and I've heard a lot of these people sing and perform, and they have an interesting, unique way of speaking. And I think I mentioned when I did Aries, that I mentioned Marlon Brando. Like, he's an actor he had his own very unique kind of mumble, right? I don't know if that was a method acting thing or what, but Marlon was a double Aries, and he had this kind of mumble to him. And I don't think he had any major Gemini, but he comes to mind as far as language, even though he was an Aries. But Gemini II, people have a mumble almost. And when I get to the celebrities, I think you'll agree with that. There's a very unique way, even though this isn't even the Aquarius decan. The next Gemini period will be the Aquarius period. This is the Venus decan. But I think because of the Libra influence, maybe a Libra flavor, it gives them an interesting way of speaking that can be diplomatic, charming, sweet or suave, or kind of odd, maybe sort of undeveloped, like a young boy or a young girl. So it doesn't mean they're not smart, but they obviously could have a speech language issue, right? They could have that, but it could be just a boyish or girlish kind of way of carrying themselves, even into adulthood, even into their 40s, 50s, 60s. That is either immature or youthful, depending on how you look at it. But they share attention. So the difference with a Gemini 2, I think, this week, as opposed to a pure Gemini from last week, which is more into freedom, Geminis born this week are going to want to share attention more. So they like their space, but not quite as much. They need, with the Venus decan, and they need more attention, and they have a physical spark to them. So their spark's going to be a little more physical, or maybe more tactile, I think, because of Venus. And they're more concerned about being misunderstood. Again, this comes with the language. So they may have a language barrier and that sort of thing. So if a Gemini 2 person's really into language, I would think, as an astrologer, it would be incredibly important to know what their Mercury sign is in their chart, the Mercury house placement, the Mercury aspects, and then look at the transiting Mercury, which I talked about briefly in my Gemini video that's coming tomorrow afternoon. My latest Gemini video will be live tomorrow afternoon, I think around 4 or so. So check that out, because I talk about the astrological chart from tonight as well, briefly. So there's definitely an idea that I don't want to be misunderstood. Whereas the first Gemini period, they're more concerned about a raw action and raw ideas. And they're not thinking things through as much as maybe a Gemini with the language bent would on this week. Obviously curious, Geminis, I think Geminis are either Geminis can be profound and intellectual, or they can be incredibly superficially chatty and smart. So they can come across as smart, but they don't really have that to back it up if they're called on it. So that's one area where Geminis can kind of have a dark side, if you will. Darker areas is because Geminis often, I think, now this is getting into a psychological area, which I'm not a psychologist, but Geminis are, like I said, Geminis are very interested and curious about people and things and how things tick. And they will often, in short bursts, delve deeply into something. So some people think, oh, Gemini is such a superficial sign. They read for 10 minutes and then they're on to the next thing. Well, not necessarily. They zoom in because of that curiosity. But Gemini 2s there might be an interest in something darker or different than themselves. If they see themselves as happy and gay and kind of light, they might be more interested in other people or situations that are a little deeper or a little more quiet or mysterious. That's just natural. Those opposites could attract. So it's very important to know the maturity level, right, of any sign. But the maturity level of a Gemini, I think, would be very telling. I've known older Geminis that are extremely youthful, that act younger, and I've known younger Geminis that are mature for their age, and they may act older or be very appropriate for their age, whatever that may be. But Geminis, they have the potential to be dark or conniving if they want to get something that they don't quite know how to do it. And that obviously that's the changeable nature of any Gemini planet. And it's just there. It's dual. It's a mutable, dual, changeable, malleable sign. So no matter how much a Gemini planet works on being devoted or stable, having a routine, all those things kind of that we need in life, but that also get boring, the Gemini planet eventually will have to break from that, even if it's just temporarily. We'll have to break a little bit and break that routine and change something up. So as long as the loved ones of the person with the Gemini planets know about that, it's fine. You just give them the space, and they're going to change a little bit. Doesn't mean necessarily they're changing their whole personality or who they are, but they're, for a week or two, they might be into a new subject or something. And that's just Gemini. I've traveled with friends that obviously I know their charts, and I know their Gemini planets. And I don't have any Gemini planets, so I can't speak from experience. All I can speak of is from what I've observed and read. But it seems hard to me to have a Gemini planet and to be able to stick to anything for any length of time. That's what I'm not saying they can't do it, but it seems hard because I've traveled and done activities. It's kind of like, well, what's over here? Okay. Oh, that's interesting. For a time, 10, 15 minutes. And then it's kind of like always onto something else. And I'm not ready. I'm not ready to shift those gears yet. And so I wonder, I would love to hear more from Geminis, or more from even Moon in Geminis, Gemini rising, Mars in Gemini, because that's the energy. I've known a lot of Mars Gemini people. I would love to know what the impetus is from someone that doesn't have any Gemini planets, what the impetus is with that, to want to say, what's next? Why you're not enjoying, or why you can't enjoy whatever it is that you're enjoying for that length of time, maybe that other signs can enjoy longer. I don't know. It's an interesting thing. It's something I always notice in charts that have major Gemini, always. And I would love for it to not work. So I would say, okay, this doesn't work, but it's pretty much there. And that need for variety, obviously, that's Gemini. Variety is the spice of life. That also goes for any predominance of air signs in the chart. If you're a Gemini, but you also have Aquarius or Libra too, that's going to be very strong. But Geminis this week, the variety makes them innovative. They come up with some very interesting ideas and interesting schemes. So Geminis are often, they can be light years ahead of other signs as far as it being innovative, almost kind of like an Aquarius. And so you have the need for variety, innovative, creative thinking, and then that comes into being competitive. And the Venus Decan, adding a little Libra flavor, if they want attention, that however that attention might be, it might be just kind of like admiration for their mental prowess, maybe mental prowess. That's why I would look at it for a Gemini that's strongly into language. Somebody that can really almost like a cult leader that can hypnotize people into believing what he or she wants, even though there are, there's a negative agenda behind it. But, Gemini 2s have that, and they can be competitive, mostly mentally. But if you have athletic ability, that would be both mental and competitive, physically competitive as well. So the misuse of all that, I think, with a Gemini 2 is they can be flaky, for lack of a better term. And I think all the mutable signs, too much mutable in a chart, mutable signs need other signs to balance them out and ground them. The mutable signs can kind of flip from one thing to another. And obviously there's 4 mutable signs. So it's not just Gemini. The other ones can do it as well and can be very restless. So if a Gemini 2, I'm thinking, is not feeling secure, then they may just be acting superficial, or may just approach their friendships or relationships on a more superficial level to make it easier because they're not feeling as secure. So it's important for them to just work on themselves so they can feel secure. And pay attention. Here's a lesson. Pay attention to the image that you project to others. So the way the Gemini energy, how like some astrologers, when they're teaching courses or they're teaching models or systems, a lot of astrologers will use this technique. When someone comes into a room, what elements do you feel and see? So you use all your senses. Do you feel, are they fiery? Are they watery and mysterious? Are they solid and earthy? Or are they coming in like a wind? So if those people that have a lot of air in their chart, that when they walk into a room, you feel the wind. It doesn't mean they command it or they're the center of attention, but there's something about their aura or the way they talk or speak that is indicative of air, at least I think. So that's really, really true with Geminis, and especially Gemini 2s with the Venus. You have to pay attention to your image to others, because Gemini is one of those dual signs that can kind of be dark and light, quiet and loud, quiet 1 minute, loud the next. But the Gemini mind, or the mentalism of Gemini, can come on pretty strong. And so it's important for Gemini 2s to pay attention and know what, even if people aren't giving you honest feedback, kind of, gain a little more insight, a little more quiet for that. So that brings me to the next point, which is use silence, straighten out a messy mind. I know that sounds kind of weird, but that would be that's good for all of us, all signs, right? No matter what our Mercury's in or our Sun's in. We have a lot going on in the world right now with politics and wars, and there's so much going on that we're all, plus just our day-to-day stuff of our bills and our family and our pets, and take care of our homes or apartments or whatever, condos. We have so many little things that it's on our minds or on our to-do list. So especially for Gemini, the mental motor, and I've said that phrase a lot with Gemini, the mental motor of Gemini is always there. I've never known anybody with major Gemini that didn't have some sort of mental motor that goes at quite a pace. So, and again, that can go along with disorders too. If anyone has ADD or ADHD traits or neuroatypical, mind patterns, we're all on a spectrum, kind of, if you want to think of it that way. Not just people that have official labels, so which isn't always fair to them. We're all on no one is 100% or right at zero on probably on anything. But that's very important to use silence and straighten out your messy mind, because Geminis can be decisive. Geminis can be very swift and forceful about what they like. If they like someone or an idea, let's do this. They could put a plan in motion quick. Doesn't mean they might stick to it, but they'll put it in quick. But they'll very often pull back. That neutrality of Gemini, they'll pull back and then they'll go, was that the decision I wanted? Let's rethink this. And with the Gemini plus the Venus, the Libra flavor there might be more vacillation there, possibly. So if a Mercury person born this week, if you're born in the coming week and you're a Gemini, obviously, if your Mercury is also in Gemini in your natal birth chart, wow. Now, your Sun and Mercury can be in the same sign and not be conjunct, which means they're just grouped together by the degrees, really close. They could be in the same sign, but be, let's say, 8 or 9 degrees apart, which would not be that close. But you're still going to be a double Gemini, for the most part. But then you would look at your house placement and you could look at other things. But if a Gemini person has Mercury in Cancer, that's going to throw a whole different flavor into how that Gemini person thinks, especially with having a messy mind or silence. And that's where the other signs can come into play and support Gemini. So silence is good. Increase consideration with others. So that doesn't necessarily mean Gemini is inconsiderate. I don't see Gemini, in general, I don't see Geminis as people that are willingly inconsiderate, or maybe as much as maybe like the fire signs can be. Sometimes fire signs just want to be who they are and they don't really care who's listening. And they can be quite blunt. So I don't see necessarily Gemini. Carolyn says, that's so true about the mental motor. I have Gemini rising. Oh, great. Thank you for the comment. Yeah. And I know other people with Gemini rising. Yeah, that it makes sense. And of course, with Gemini, a Gemini rising person, Mercury is your ruler. So it rules you over your whole chart. And then you look at your sign and everything. But the mental motor there, yeah. So it's very important, I think, for people born this week to increase consideration to others. And again, that's awareness. So the polarization, so Gemini II is polarized the opposite in 6 months from the Sagittarius II person at the beginning of December. And I can't believe we're thinking about the end of the year. Whoa, slow down, right? Let's slow it down. But it's polarized with Sagittarius II. So you always want to consider the opposite. And a Sagittarius II and a Gemini II, Sagittarius II people are also into language, but not in the same way. They can be a little offbeat, and they could be into odd things when you consider this axis. Gemini 2, Sag 2 is kind of odd placement with each other. So if you consider that the Sagittarius 2 person is a little more direct in their personality, and so people would see a Sagittarius 2 person's personality or force coming probably quicker than the Gemini 2. And I don't know if that's maybe because the Sag person's more aware of their image. I'm not sure. Again, that would also depend on their Jupiter. But the polarization, Gemini, it would be good to consider, the more of the honest, direct fire sign way of being with others. Others might feel more secure when you're a little more transparent and maybe not as tricky with your behavior, I guess, so to speak. Again, a lot of that has to do with evolvement and maturity, your age. Well, age is not always a good indicator of maturity, right? I think we can all agree on that. we've all known people that, are at 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that act much younger than their age. And that's not always a good thing. But so right now we're 40 minutes in. I'm just going to take a little moment here. This is wonderful. I'm here on the East Coast, and my live streams, just to remind everybody, last week was Saturday, and the week before that was Saturday, or 2 weeks. I know I missed one, but today's Friday, obviously. So I have a lot going on right now in my house with remodeling. There's a lot going on right now at the end of the school year, and we're doing a lot of stuff. So I'm doing Fridays or Saturdays. I don't know from week to week which it's going to be, but just put a note if you subscribe. Put a note on your phone or something that it's right now. I'm always doing it at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time or New York Standard Time, and it's at Astroscoop 3801, which is the channel name on here on YouTube. And you can also get my messages about it on X or Twitter, and also Instagram. You can follow me on there. But it's either Fridays or Saturdays. And if I can get more people, I might do a lunchtime one during the week, like at 12 or 1, because I have some flexibility on certain days. Like at 12 or 1, I might do like a half an hour, maybe not a full hour. So let me know if there's any interest in that. We could do that. But to get back to the polarization with Sag, Geminis need some insight. Geminis can have amazing insight into things in their environment because Geminis are such good observers. Geminis are so sharp and observe really well. Even I noticed that with Gemini kids. My nephew is an amazing student. He is a Gemini moon. He's a Pisces Gemini moon. He's an amazing student. He's probably going to be a scientist when he grows up. But he has a he learns things so quickly. So that's another thing with almost any Gemini planet and rising is that facility to learn things so quickly. Doesn't mean it's necessarily that deep or substantial, but you do learn it quickly. So really, really Gemini, and this isn't a dig against the Gemini planet, but it's just because Geminis are always looking around the corner. That mental motor. What's going on? What's here? When I visit a city, I have an idea of what I want to visit. I don't want to do too little, and I don't want to do too much. That's just me. I want a nice balanced vacation. Like I want to do enough and be active during the day that I feel like I got my money's worth, and I want to be a little tired at night. If I'm not tired at night, that means I probably didn't do enough. So I don't want to be too lazy. But with Gemini, it's kind of like I wouldn't want to go to Gemini pace where you're doing so many things that you're absolutely then you got to try to turn that motor off and exhaust it at night. So Geminis need insight, the Gemini II, and that can also come from the Pisces Virgo 2 periods, because Pisces is square Gemini and Virgo is square Gemini. So the Pisces 2 period that comes in the winter, and then the Virgo 2 period that comes in September. So the Virgo 2 period is similar in some ways to the Gemini that we'll be talking about in a few months, in the fact that it's both ruled by Mercury, but obviously Virgo is an earth sign, and then it also has a different sub-ruler, and it's later on in the zodiac, which indicates in one sense more maturity, right? Because Gemini is more youthful, and the symbology as well. But so that's a good way to think about it. Geminis could learn from the polar opposite Sag, can learn from Pisces and Virgo, maybe to have a little more insight or a little more quiet, possibly. I've known loud Pisces, so it just depends on the chart. Pisces have other indicators. A normally shy, maybe quiet Pisces person can be loud. So it just depends. There's a lot to look at. All right, so we're at 45. So I think I lost a couple people. I think maybe it's just one now. All right, so let's go to the celebrities here. So when I looked at the celebrities, again, I only put people that are born in this period. So it's just people that are born in the next week. It's not any Gemini person. Like last week, we talked about Gemini people that were born in the true Gemini period. This is the second Venus Decan people. So we have Elena Piscopia. She was a scholar, a female scholar, and I believe she was the first woman to receive a degree, or she did something very, very monumental in the world of achieving education and literature. So obviously, Geminis have immense natural talent. That's another thing we talked about, is Geminis having talent. So that's pretty amazing. Kenny G, the saxophone pop jazz person, Kenny's music, the latter day music, his later music is kind of a little cheesy maybe, but I kind of enjoy his older music, kind of cool instrumental. And he has his own language, the way he speaks and his hair and his body language and the way he plays his instrument. He definitely has his own language. I look at that and it's unique to me. Richard Butler, you can look him up from the Psychedelic Furs, which is a band from the 70s and 80s and 90s. I've seen him in concert with the Furs, and he has a very interesting accent, obviously because he's British, but also he has a very unique way of speaking and singing. He says like imitation of Christ. That's how he says Christ. He says Christ, and it's just the way he sings it and the syllables. Just very, very interesting. It all correlates with the language. Mark Wahlberg, who used to be a small time actor from Dorchester, Mass. Grew up in a tough neighborhood in Massachusetts. And kind of went up the ranks, kind of similar to Matt Damon and Ben Affleck. Mark Wahlberger, he has the burger company. Wahlberg, the actor and rapper, singer. He has an interesting way of speaking, obviously from where he's from in Mass, the accent, but it's more than that. Again, it's his own language. And some of these Gemini people too, there's a kind of they don't mind being brash. They don't go out of their way necessarily, I think, to be sweet. It doesn't mean they can't be sweet, but I see that period with the Venus is they can be charming, but not necessarily sweet, if that makes any sense. Robert Englund, he played Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street. Again, look how he used his body and his mask and the fingers. He had knives for fingers. And a very, very unique actor. Not the best actor in the world, but his voice, the language, very unique. And funny too. Definitely funny. Jimmy Jam, in my opinion, one of the best modern day producers and songwriters. Jimmy Jam from Jam and Lewis. He's worked with everybody from Prince to The Time, and he produced the guys from New Edition and Janet Jackson, Johnny Gill, Ralph Tresvant, and he worked with the SOS band on R&B. He has done so much amazing music with Terry Lewis, his partner, and he's an amazing Gemini. And he says when he produces people, he looks for their own musical language. That's what he does. So there you go. Liam Neeson, he's really, really good actor. He's getting up there. I think he's going to be 71, I think, or 72. Has a particular set of skills, so don't make him mad. Patty McAloon, that's a more obscure Gemini reference. He is a singer from a group called Prefab Sprout, which is a kind of an alternative pop British group, and has a very odd way of talking and singing. Very, very odd, but I think very pleasing. And he's a great, he's a songwriter that's on the level of a Joe Jackson Elton John, Billy Joel, or Elvis Costello. All those songwriting guys. But see, you don't know his name. He's not talked about in those circles, but he's as good as them. The songwriting is great. And of course, Prince, the artist formerly known as Prince. I mean, I mentioned him last week, but I mean, love him or hate him, rest in peace, Prince. He was absolutely brilliant. And I mean, did he not have his own sense of language with his dress, the way he danced, and his body movement? And Prince pissed a lot of people off, right? He was brash and acerbic and abrasive, but also charming. He put a lot of love, I think, and a lot of love and feeling and thought into his music. A lot of his music, he was I think a strongly feeling Gemini. So I could see the Venus Decan in him, but he's just amazing. I don't like all of his music, but he undeniable, prodigious talent, Prince. William Dampier was one of the guys, explorers that circumnavigated the world the most, I think like 3 times. So again, Gemini II, what's around the corner? There you go. Of course, the person that went around the globe the most was a Gemini, right? Wasn't a Taurus. Bonnie Tyler, she's kind of like a Stevie Nicks kind of singer-songwriter. Very, very, very ebullient, very strong, forceful voice. And she was on the Footloose soundtrack, I Need a Hero, songs like that. Very Total Eclipse of the Heart. Very interesting songs. Nick Rhodes from the supergroup Duran Duran. He's the keyboard player. Beautiful ethereal keyboards that he's put into their music, especially from their 80s stuff. Duran Duran's latest stuff I don't like as much, but their earlier stuff really, really beautiful with Nick Rhodes' mercurial influence. Kanye West, holy cow, talk about a divided kind of guy. Geminis are very divided. I would guess people would either say I like them or don't like, or I don't care for them. I don't think it would be a lot of in between with a lot of Gemini personalities, especially Gemini males. Just my take. But Kanye West, yeah, very abrasive. Again, but I don't appreciate his music, but he's very talented in his own way. He's extremely talented and brilliant, like Prince was. So, Yolo Maraduena, he's probably the youngest on here, and he's a new rise. He plays Miguel on the Cobra Kai Netflix series, and he's great in that. He's also in a movie called Blue Beetle. So he's a rising talent, and he seems to be very, very intelligent and mercurial, and he is very likable, very, very likable Gemini. I think he's going to do really well in movies. And of course, the troubled yet very vibrant Judy Garland. And what can you say about Judy Garland's life? I mean, what a tragedy. But she had a lot of personal problems and tumultuous times, and she was attracted to kind of troubled, dark people in her life, and she had those types of people. So the insecure Gemini person, especially a Gemini II, the Gemini is not going to be necessarily a great picker of partners. They're gonna go through partners that are not good for them and are not right, and could be a little attraction to danger, just something wild, something different, that kind of thing. Maxi Priest, he had a few hits. He's kind of poppy, ebullient music, pretty good. Gene Wilder, the original Wonka, and obviously he did a lot of other stuff. What a zany Gemini actor he was, but again with his hair and his eyes and his body language. Look at all the physical stuff he does in the movie Wonka. Willy Wonka, like the physical stuff. Like there's a scene where he does a flip and he does all this stuff with his hat, and it's so Gemini, so Gemini. And Gene's a double Gemini. Gene also has Gemini rising. So Sun in Gemini and Gemini rising. Can you imagine what it must have been like to be Gene Wilder? Woo, that can't be easy. Oh my gosh. So, but actually, very, very, very interesting talent. And Johnny Depp, who I forgot to put on this list, who's also a Gemini in the same vein of Gene Wilder. Johnny Depp is in no way as talented as Gene Wilder or some of these other people. Johnny Depp, in my opinion, is very overrated, although he can be. He has moments where he can be quite talented. And I think he's good. I just think he's so overrated, his name, to be put in the canon of like huge, or like if you were to think of a Gemini person this week, Walt Whitman, right? The essayist and poet. He's in the canon of like the biggest of all time, Walt Whitman, not Johnny Depp. That's just my opinion. And then Peter Dinklage, he's a very underrated actor. He is amazing. He is small but mighty. He does comedy. I recently saw a drama of his in the last year. I can't remember the name of it, but it was kind of a dark drama. He did it really well. And he's very mercurial and kind of mysterious and highly intelligent. And again, I know Peter has his own neuro sort of atypical issues in his life, but he has an amazing language to him. He has an amazing way of speaking with the beard. And I mean, so that's what I was talking about when we started about the language and linguistics, which I mentioned in my video that's coming out tomorrow, Gemini 2 people. And of course, all Geminis. And next week, we're going to talk about the Gemini 3 period, which will be the last and final period of Gemini. And of course, as we go through a sign through the weeks, we're obviously going closer to, we're getting later into a season, which is a different energy, right? I'm looking, here it is almost 8 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. And I think it was last week or the week before, it was the first time I noticed when I looked to the west that I still had some brightness on the trees. The sun is starting to set. It's going to set, I think, in about 20 minutes. But it's still like there's a vibrancy in the air, that's indicative of late spring and getting into a little bit later Gemini. And then in a week or two, it feels different, right? It'll feel different Gemini, and then it gets closer to that Cancer and to that watery energy. And of course, at least in this hemisphere, the summer energy. In the opposite hemisphere, it's going to be winter. But the Cancer will be coming. So I just wanted to mention quickly, I'm going to take a quick look here. I wasn't able to print out the chart, but the astrological chart that I talk about, tonight's chart for 7 p.m., May 31st, 2024, that I talk about in my video tomorrow, is now all the Gemini, this is what's so important, I think. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is now stationed in Taurus. We're in a late degree of Taurus, so it's like a Taurus Gemini cusp energy for Mercury, but it still is Taurus. So all this Gemini energy, so those Geminis that had your birthday this week and your birthday next week, you're getting your solar return, but you're also getting Venus. Venus and the sun are really close right now in Gemini. So Venus is hitting your sun. How nice is that? So hopefully that's going to make you feel more loving or more charming, or bring that to you from other people. And Jupiter has now gone into Gemini, finally, after Taurus. So Jupiter's in Gemini, and that's going to affect every Gemini planet. And if you're a Gemini rising, Jupiter's now in your 12th house, but eventually it will make its way to hit your first house and will enlarge your Gemini personality, I guess, for your first house, right? It might also enlarge your, how much you talk. So that may or may not be a good thing, depending on, but it will probably enlarge your wanting to read, think things out and wanting to do more reading, more collating, maybe more filing of things. And all that goes back to Mercury and Taurus, which just was conjunct to Uranus. So a lot of sudden changes there with Mercury. And there's no other real fixed strong energies besides that Mercury and Taurus. There's no major Scorpio. Leo is laying low. And of course, Aquarius, where we only have that Pluto at 1 degree of Aquarius, which is retrograde now. And that's hitting. So for any early Gemini, so now we're at 10 of Gemini. So now we're moving away from that Pluto trine. But the early Gemini people had a Pluto Aquarius trine to their sun. You later Geminis born from now, from 10 degrees to 20 and later, it's going to be a long time till Pluto actually gives you an exact trine to your Gemini planets. And that also goes for all the Librans out there as well. It's going to take a while till, if you're a later Libra, if you're an early Libra, you're like on a Virgo Libra cusp, you're getting that Pluto Aquarius trine. But I mentioned the Pluto and Aquarius transit because that's all the astrologers are talking about, because it's an early degree and it's hitting the early fixed signs. So it's a square to Scorpio, a square to Taurus, and then an opposition to an early Leo. So that can create a lot of tension, especially for the early Scorpio and Taurus planets. That can create some tension. So that can also create, I think, some health challenges, because there could be some lessons there. Anytime there's Pluto or Saturn, anything that's heavy, it's usually lessons. So if there's some health issues or some power issues with yourself or people, you just got to ride with it. Don't fight it, because there's probably a lesson in there. And, it's just the way it is. But there's not a lot to talk about. We still have a lot of Pisces. The moon is in Pisces tonight, and it's actually conjunct Neptune, which is nice. So that's a real, very, very Piscean kind of moony night with all the Gemini. But yeah, those are, that's it for the Gemini. It all comes back to that transiting Mercury in Taurus, which at least isn't retrograde for now. So again, I just want to remind everybody, if you see this in the future, live streams are Fridays or Saturdays at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on YouTube. I may be doing an occasional lunch one, maybe on Instagram or YouTube here during the week at maybe 12 or 1, but I'll try to post that as much as I can. So this was Gemini II, the Venus Decan people. Happy birthday to all Geminis, because tomorrow's just June, so we're still right in the thick of late spring and that Gemini energy. And I think, at least for me, Gemini feels things feel a little lighter. They're getting lighter as we're moving away from the earlier spring and the Taurus. Depending on where Gemini is in your chart and depending on what your Mercury is in, Mercury is vital. Mercury in the chart is vital for communication, but for planets in Gemini or Gemini rising folks like Carolyn, Mercury is so important. It's such a focal point for that person in their thinking, how they relate to others, and their interests, their mental interests. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much for attending. Hope you watch this in the future or catch the replay. And don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And I'll see you all, or maybe one of you, whomever, doesn't matter. We're growing. Doesn't matter how long it takes to grow, as long as we're growing. So have a great week. Happy birthday, Gemini.